OpenAI is poaching Apple employees for its upcoming hardware product. There's been an investigation into the AI video model Sora and its training data. There's a brand new AI model from Elon Musk's xAI. All that and much more on this episode of New Tech Nightly, recorded taped to live from the Big Pink Building in beautiful downtown Portland, Oregon. Let's jump into the tech news. OpenAI is poaching Apple employees and tapping Apple suppliers for its first hardware product potentially coming next year. So we've known that OpenAI is creating some kind of hardware device, but that's becoming much more real as 24 Apple employees have joined. That's across UI, wearables, cameras, and audio. This is pretty bold of OpenAI to be going after Apple employees, especially because OpenAI and Apple have a partnership already with ChatGPT integrated into Apple's Siri product and GPT-5 also integrated in Xcode, Apple's developer product. But not only that, but also looking at Apple suppliers to help manufacture this hardware device. Now, Johnny Ive, which famously led Apple design for years before leaving to form his own studio, is deeply involved in this new OpenAI hardware device, so it makes sense that they'd have an Apple-style approach, wanting to get some Apple employees on the team and working with Apple suppliers. But still, it's definitely a bold move considering how powerful Apple is. It's like, you don't necessarily want to piss off Apple. But OpenAI doesn't care. They're moving forward. And if you hadn't heard the previous rumors, this device is likely a screenless smart speaker-like device, but we don't really know what they're building. And the timing for this launch is rumored to be in 2026 or maybe even early 2027. The Washington Post has investigated OpenAI's Sora product. That's their AI video model that's able to generate videos just from text prompts or image prompts. And the Washington Post has found in this new report that Sora can closely mimic Netflix shows, studio logos, TikTok, and Twitch watermarks. And they say that this suggests that OpenAI was training on versions of that content. Now, of course, OpenAI has not specifically said where their training data comes from for their Sora product, but this investigation definitely doesn't make OpenAI look very good. OpenAI has said that they get their training data from publicly available and licensed sources, but there has been mounting legal and policy pressure over undisclosed training sets. Now, the Washington Post says they were just using plain prompts and they got some of these results. In the past, we've seen how you can do some pretty strong prompt engineering to get outputs that might be classified as regurgitation, but I think it's important to note that OpenAI has made it clear that regurgitation, and that's when an output will resemble something that was in the training data, is absolutely not what they're trying to do with these products. The whole point of generative AI is to generate something new. While it is true that these models rely on training data, that training data is never stored in the actual model. In the training process, a model will look at the training data and find patterns in that training data that is then translated into vector embeddings. These vector embeddings are not copies of the training data. It's very similar to how the human mind works, where, we can watch a movie and we're not storing a copy of the movie in our mind, but we do get inspiration from that film since we've seen it, and then we can take that inspiration to go into the world and create something new and original, even if it was inspired by something that we saw. So that's how these models just technically work, but that doesn't mean that there needs to be strong guardrails in place to make sure that these models don't regurgitate anything that they might have seen in training data. In the past, OpenAI has said that regurgitation happens most often when there's duplicates in the training data and that they're working very hard to bring regurgitation to zero. But this Washington Post report shows that's definitely not the case right now, and you can definitely get these models to regurgitate things if you try, apparently even with plain prompts. There's a lot of lawsuits going through the courts right now that are all about this, but some of the recent rulings have leaned towards this idea that if you legally acquire training data, such as in Anthropic's case where they bought millions of real physical books under legal channels, then Anthropic stripped them of their bindings and scanned them in digitally, which of course destroyed these books in the process. A judge did rule that that was legal under the fair use doctrine. But of course, Anthropic also pirated books illegally. Those were digital copies that weren't actually destroying any physical books, but they were acquired illegally, and that was not ruled as fair use, and Anthropic is now in the process of a $1.5 billion settlement regarding those digitally acquired pirated books. So if OpenAI acquired this training data under legal channels, then it might be deemed as fair use. But if they were pirating Netflix shows, that might be a whole nother story. But all of this is developing, and we're going to see more court rulings in the future. So really, we'll just have to wait and see how this shakes out. But I will say this Washington Post article definitely does not make OpenAI look good. As the best fair use practices are still being figured out, I personally believe it's really important for those that are using these models to do so in the most ethical way possible. And for me, that means making sure that if you're using these models, that you're checking to make sure that there's no regurgitation errors in the outputs that you're generating. And if you do see those, simply not using that and trying different prompts, because these tools can be leveraged to create something new, as long as we're very thoughtful about how we're using them. And at the same time, I have an open mind about all of this, and I'm continuing to learn about how these models really work and best practices for how to leverage them. And I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on this. Wan 2.2 Animate is a new open source video model that allows for lifelike character animation. This is an open source model that can animate a character from a still image from another real video of a human that drives the performance. So it's almost like you can puppeteer characters using this model, and the model will match all of your micro expressions and motion. There's actually two models: the Animate model, which will drive a still image, and then there's a Replace model that will swap a character into the source video. This is one of the most high fidelity character models that we've seen, and the fact that it's open source means that anyone can download it and run it locally on your own machine. Models like this that are actually driven by real human acting, I think are pretty cool, because the human is still in the loop. You can have a human actor create a really detailed performance video and then use that performance video to drive an animated character, for example. This kind of motion capture process used to be extremely expensive in traditional VFX workflows. So this could open up a whole bunch of creative possibilities for those with smaller budgets or independent filmmakers. Now, of course, there's a lot of controversy about using AI models at all in creative work, but on the show, I like to cover the latest, and this model is definitely one of the best models that I've seen for this kind of puppeteering character animation work. xAI has launched Grok 4 Fast. This is a new model that's at near Grok 4 quality at a lower cost. It uses 40% fewer thinking tokens than the full Grok 4 model, but it gets similar benchmark scores. This speed cost play could definitely broaden the usage of this model. It has a 2 billion token context window, which is very good. The architecture aims to blend reasoning and non-reasoning paths, and the early community academic takes say that it has strong capabilities, but adoption still depends on reliability and, of course, the safety track record. And let's be honest, Grok and Elon Musk's xAI company are not really known for safety. A lot of their models have gone off the rails in the past. Whether that was their fault or not, that's just the reputation that they have. So we'll have to see whether this Grok 4 Fast model is good enough for developers to start adopting this. The White House is saying that the TikTok deal is pretty much done and is pending signatures, and this would keep TikTok in the US under de facto American control. There's been years of drama about this TikTok sale, so we'll see if this is going to be real, but this looks like it's happening. They say that 6 out of 7 of the board seats will go to Americans. Oracle is set to manage the US data and security. They're claiming that the algorithm will be controlled by America, so we'll see if this actually goes through, but they say that this deal will be signed in the coming days. The DOJ versus Google ad tech breakup remedies trial has begun. After a judge found that Google illegally monopolized key ad tech markets, the DOJ is seeking structural fixes, specifically selling parts of Google's business, and they're focusing on the ad tech side of Google's business, so this could really reshape digital advertising. The DOJ is asking for a divestiture of Google's ad manager units. Of course, Google is saying that the DOJ is overreaching, and they're suggesting they could improve their interoperability instead. So we'll see how this shakes out. This is a years-long process that's been ongoing. It looks like now that the DOJ is focusing more on the ad tech side of Google's business. Anker's Soundcore Sleep A30 buds actively mask snoring. That's right, these are new sleep-focused earbuds from Anker, and they have noise cancellation with adaptive snore masking. Basically, the case is listening for snoring, and the buds will then emit a counter-snore audio. We'll have to see if that works, but they're also 7% slimmer, and they get 9 hours of local playback or 6.5 hours of streaming audio. These buds are $229, and they also have brainwave soundscapes, sleep tracking, and a private alarm. If you live in Portland, Oregon, you might be interested in hosting this show. This is a soft launch version, but we'd love to have multiple hosts with different perspectives, more of a conversational feel. So if you're interested, please reach out at hello@resonant.works. But in the meantime, I'll be back next week.